We're up to operating temperature now. The pump has slowed down to a medium speed, and the fan has also come down to the medium speed. So we're running off the desktop power supply. We're on setting number 3. And we have hot air. So today I have this power supply from an old desktop computer. This is your typical 500 watt ATX power supply. And I'm going to be turning this into a power supply for my diesel heater. When you look at the label on the side, you can see DC output, and there's different voltages listed. Each one of those voltages corresponds to a different color wire. We have a 3.3, a 5 volt, we have two 12 volt lines, a negative 12 volt, and another 5 volt. So what got my attention with this is the 12 volt line is rated for 20 amps. So I know when my diesel heater starts up, it pulls about 10 to 12 amps to warm up the glow plug inside. Then once it's running, it's only a pump and a fan, and that pulls probably about 1 to 2 amps. So let's plug this thing in and we'll see if it works, see if we can get some voltage output. And then I'm going to add some banana plugs and a fuse holder, cut these wires off, and we'll mount it on the wall. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to plug it in and test the voltage on each one of the wires to make sure we have an output. So we'll plug it in and into the wall. And I'm going to set up my meter here with a little stand. I only have 2 hands, so I need to use this little guy. Each one of these wires corresponds to a different color on the harness. And I know that the yellow wire is one of the 12 volt lines. The black wire is your common ground. So we're going to use this connector to test and see what voltage we have. Move this over here so we can see. And I'll bring in my digital multimeter. We'll set that to DC volts in the auto range function and try and move this somewhere that's still in camera view. Alright. We'll take our black lead, put that in on the black wire, and then we'll take our red lead and we'll put that in on the yellow wire. And you can see here there's no voltage. We'll turn that on and nothing happened. Fan isn't spinning. That's to be expected. So what that means is we need to take this part of the harness, the one with the green wire. So the green wire right here is a remote power on, and your computer uses this to turn the power supply on. Here it is. So we need to take this green wire and we'll jump it to ground. To do that, I have a paper clip, and power supply is still on. I'll move this over a little bit so we can see. So when I put the paper clip in on the green and black wire, you'll see the fan over here start to spin, and you'll see the voltage on the meter start to give me a readout. So I'll try to do this so it all gets on camera. There's no voltage on this line, it's only a voltage sensing. It senses the green wire when it gets pulled to ground. So we'll go in a black wire and we'll go into green. Paperclip is in. You can see we have 12.27 volts, and you can see right here the fan is now spinning. So that means that this power supply is working for the 12 volts. Now I'm going to check the other voltages just to make sure that the transformer and the MOSFETs and things aren't damaged and that we have a good output. I'm going to be putting a dummy load resistor on the lower voltages just to help regulate the power, where I'm going to be pulling so many amps on startup for the heater. So that's just maybe 160 ohm resistor, 7 or 10 watt on the 3.3 voltage line and the 5 voltage line. Let's check the voltages on the other wires. I think the red wire here is the 5 volts. So let's pull these out. We're going into that one and into the red. So we have 4.96, 4.97, 5 volts. Let's check the orange wire. So I can leave the black lead in on this cable, and I'll take my red lead over here and we'll put it in. I'll move that paper clip a little bit. Yeah, that's the only one I can use. So that'll stay there. And we'll put the red lead on the orange. And you can see my orange wire has 3.27, 3.28, 3.29 volts, 3.3 volts. So let's open this thing up and see. I'll turn it off, disconnect the meter, put that to the side, unplug. So what I need to do is open up the power supply. I'll take our small Phillips screwdriver and remove these screws. So I don't need all of these yellow wires or all of these black wires. I'm going to cut them off and desolder them from the board. I'll keep probably 3 to 4 of each wire. I also need to keep the green wire, and I can get rid of all of the rest. I'm just going to cut off all the connectors and zip ties and try and tidy up these wires a little bit before I get started. Now when we look at the back here, we can see all the wires. They're all soldered in, these big blobs. So I'm going to remove a lot of what's going on there and just leave the wires that I need. So all these ones that I cut off, I'm going to get rid of all that solder and all them wires. So let's plug in the, plug in my soldering iron, let that warm up. Turn that on. And I have a little piece of solder here. And I'm going to heat up the solder, pull all these little wires out, get this a little more organized to work with. So we'll add a little bit of solder just to get that heat flowing. There we go. And then I can start grabbing each one of these wires. Yeah. I'm going to have a closer look. Okay, all the solder is all tidied up, all cleaned up. The wires are now a lot neater. So next thing I need to do is take this green wire and loop it down into one of those black, where one of those black wires was. And I'm going to loop underneath, and we'll go in here. So I'll cut that off right there. So I'm going to tin the tip of this wire first, and what that means is I take the soldering iron and my solder, and I just add a little bit of solder to the end here to stick all the wires together. And then when I go to put it in through the hole, and if you remember, the back of this is all tinned, so it doesn't matter which one this goes in, I'll put it right here. Let's see if we can get a better view. It's gonna go right over here, and it doesn't matter, somewhere in this black area here. There we go. Snip the end of that off so it's not so long. So that's my remote turn on wire, and when that green wire senses ground or 0 volts, it turns on the power supply. The next thing I need to do is I'm going to add a fuse holder. So in this I have I think it's a 15 amp fuse. And I'm going to pop that right in here somewhere. see if it'll fit. Yep, it fits. I also drilled a couple of holes for my banana plugs, and now I'm connecting the wires together. All 4 of the yellow wires are twisted together and soldered to one side of the fuse holder. The other side of the fuse holder is then connected to the red plug. All 4 of the black wires are also twisted together and are soldered to the black plug. The next thing I'm going to do is add a load resistor to each of the 3.3 and 5 volt wires. This should help regulate the power when the heater starts pulling high amperage. I'm going to join the resistors together on one side and connect that to my black ground wires.
cool everything here. So inside here I can keep this. Oh, yeah, fine, I don't have. Put the wrench in.
Everything is all connected. We have the fuse holder with a 15 amp fuse, the negative ground post, and the red positive 12 volt post for my banana plugs. And my little load resistors are tucked away nicely at the bottom. Now those resistors are just small load resistors to put a load on the transformers and the transistors, mostly because I'm going to be pulling so many amps, 10 to 12 amps, through the 12 volt line. So having a little bit of a load on those other lines will help regulate the power a little bit. So the next thing for me to do is to put it back together, and we'll turn it on and see if I have any voltage output here. So I just need to hit the on switch and see what happens. We have a fan. The fan is running. So turn it around. Bring in my voltmeter again. Turn this on DC volts. Positive. Negative. And I have 12.3 volts.
A great success!
So I now have the power supply hooked up to my diesel heater, and we are going to run a couple of tests to see how well it performs. I have my multimeter attached in series so I can measure the current draw of the heater. So let's power it on and see how well this thing runs. For some reason the audio didn't record in this part of the video. I think my microphone might have came unplugged. As you can see, on standby, the heater doesn't use very much power, maybe 10 to 30 milliamps. But once I switch on the heater and the glow plug turns on, I want to see what my maximum current draw will be. You can see the amperage increase instantly once I turn on the heater. We are at about 8.5 amps and slowly climbing. The glow plug is just a heating coil in a diesel engine that brings up the operating temperature of the burn chamber so the fuel can ignite. Now this might feel like a long part of the video, but I want to run it in real time without trimming too much, so we can see how the supply reacts under load. We're at 10 amps and the supply is doing very well. Once the burn chamber is up to temperature, the glow plug will turn off and the fan and the fuel pump will turn on. The glow plug just turned off and the fuel pump and fan are slowly ramping up. You can see how the current draw dropped down to about 2 amps. That will change as the fan and the pump speed up and slow down with the heat setting of the unit. I have the heater set to setting number 3 and it can go as high as 6. But on a normal day, this is usually the setting that I run it at. So let's try another test with the power supply, and I want to see how much power it's drawing. So I have this watt meter, the power supply is plugged into it, currently reading 0 watts. And when I turn it on, we'll get a baseline of what the power draw of the power supply is. So you can see here, I don't know if it's too bright or not. We're at about 15 watts, 14 watts, dropping down to 13.9 watts. So now I'm going to take my heater and we're going to plug the heater in. So I'll turn it off first. I'll plug in the negative wire, plug in the positive wire, make sure it's in. We'll turn that on and we'll watch the power meter. So it started up, it spiked at about I think 70 or 75 watts, and it dropped right back down to 14 or 15 watts. So you can see here, power supply is on, we're plugged in, diesel heater now, screen is on, but it's not pumping or putting out any heat. Okay, let's start up the diesel heater. And we'll see how many watts it starts to pull. So this power supply is rated for 500 watts. And the diesel heater is now on. It's warming up the glow plug. And we're using about 131 watts. So minus the 14 or 15 watts of just power supply, the diesel heater is using about 115, 116 watts with the glow plug. And the pump has started. Now if you remember from my other test, we were getting about 10 amps, I think, 10, almost 11 amps at this point in the test. So the pump is on and the fan has turned on. We're at 140 watts. And you can probably hear the fan is ramping up to a higher speed. And right there is when the glow plug stopped. We dropped back down to 37, 38 watts. 40 watts. The fan is still ramping up. So we've hit about 60 watts. So the diesel heater is warming up to temperature. The fan is on high and the pump is on high at the moment. So once it gets up to operating temperature, the pump will slow down and the fan will also slow down. And I have the setting in the medium setting of number 3. So we'll see what that drops down to. And the pump is starting to slow down. You can see the power is dropping again. We're up to operating temperature now. The pump has slowed down to a medium speed, and the fan has also come down to the medium speed. So we're running off the desktop power supply. We're on setting number 3. And we have hot air.